We, this morning, are having a little bit of a different kind of a service together. We are, this morning, going to ordain two of our men to the ministry of deacons, as our children, by the way, go downstairs. A lot of what you're going to hear from, a lot of the people you're going to hear from today are our deacons, and I hope that you will be blessed as we set these men apart for this service and for this purpose. And Dave Ratliff is going to begin with scripture reading.
There are a few verses in Scripture that deal with the qualification of a deacon, but that being said, there is one primary focal passage, and I'm going to read it today from 1 Timothy. It is in 1 Timothy chapter 3. It's going to be in verses 8 through 13. Deacons, likewise, are to be men worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in much wine, and not pursuing dishonest gain. They must keep hold of the deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience. They must first be tested, and then, if there is nothing against them, let them serve as deacons. In the same way, their wives are to be women worthy of respect, not malicious talkers, but temperate and trustworthy in everything. A deacon must be the husband of but one wife and must manage his children and his household well. Those who have served well gain an excellent standing and a great assurance in their faith in Christ Jesus. May God bless the reading of His Word, and may God bless our service today.
The two men that we are setting apart today for this purpose of serving as deacons are Justin Knitsch, and Justin, if you'll stand with your wife Nicole, and Larry McPheron, and Larry's wife Linda, I know, is in here, okay, back here, and she's already abandoned you, Larry. All right, well, you know, all right, you guys will be seated, and you know, as we rejoice in these men as they are being set apart for this purpose this morning, we thank the Lord for them. And one of the things that is important in the passage of Scripture that Dave read, it is a passage that reminds us that these are to be men who are of exemplary character. This does not mean that they are perfect by any means, but it is right that we have examples before us, individuals who set that example for us, and these men are set apart for that purpose. And as we pray for them today, we want to pray that God will help them to set that example and to live that out, and not only them, but also all of our deacons, all of these men who are set apart for this purpose of the deaconship. But also, I want to remind you that these are not the only people who serve in our church. They are serving in a specific way, in a specific purpose. And traditionally through the church, these have been men who have been set apart by the laying on of hands. And we will see that in the passage that we're going to be looking at right here in just a few moments, as we will, and we will have a time not just where the ordained men of the church will lay on hands, but also where all of us will have an opportunity to lay hands on these individuals and set them apart for the purpose of deacons, serving as deacons here in the church. And wouldn't you know, I'm having some technical difficulty here, and you just never know, right? All right, we'll get that straightened out here, and okay, good deal. And as we look at the Scripture together, you will see on the screen this morning, I'm not going to be focusing on 1 Timothy chapter 3. This was already read. It is pretty straightforward what these men are to be. But I'm going to focus instead on Acts chapter 6. And in Acts chapter 6, this is where we would see the church first setting some individuals apart for special service in the Lord, and for being a part of what the Lord, or leading in a specific purpose in the ministry of the church. And so in Acts chapter 6, we see these individuals set apart for a specific purpose. So we read in verse 1, "Now in these days when the disciples were increasing in number, a complaint by the Hellenists," and as one little child said in Sunday school, "Are these the people going to hell?" No, these are the Greeks. There were the Hebrew Christians and the Greek Christians in the early church. And these individuals were the people who would not be of Hebrew lineage, and they came together in the church. And this was one of the great things that happened in the church is this coming together under Christ, and a complaint by the Hellenists arose against the Hebrews because their widows were being neglected in the daily distribution. Now, what we see here is what we see in the church all down through the ages, right? The church has never been perfect. The church has never claimed to be perfect. There are difficulties and struggles that arise, and in those struggles, God is testing His people to see if we can work out these issues and work them out in a way that is good and right and equitable and helpful and helps the church to continue to be strong and healthy as it moves toward the future. And the problem here was there were a group of widows, the Hellenist widows, that were feeling neglected. Now, there was a process that was set up in the early church to care for those who had specific needs, and particularly to make sure everybody was fed. That was a priority. And in all of that, there was a group that felt like they were being neglected. And so we see the importance of this right away in the early church, that we care for each other in the body of Christ, right? And that we have people in place who have responsibilities to make sure this is happening. And evidently that was falling through the cracks, as we say, in the early church there. And so there was a complaint that arose that there was a group of people who were feeling neglected. And the 12, this is the apostles, the 12 summoned the full number of the disciples and said, "It is not right that we should give up preaching the Word of God to serve tables." So here we see two priorities in the church. One is that we care for one another, and the other is that we preach and pray, that the Word continue to go out, and that prayer continues to be central in the church. So these are central things that it appears in the early church were kind of working against each other, because evidently there was a group of people who were saying to the apostles, "You should take care of this. You, the apostles, should take care of making sure everybody is cared for in the way they need to be cared for." But the apostles, in the wisdom of the Holy Spirit, realized if we do this, if we are the primary caregivers in this process, then something else is going to get neglected that is also very, very important, and that is the preaching of the Word and prayer. Right? So we see those things going on. We see that struggle. And listen, all through, I've been pastoring now for about 38 years. And there's always this struggle going on. And I can tell you it's specifically a struggle for me, because I think my gifts as a pastor, a lot of times some of my greatest gifts are in caregiving and caring for people, and coming alongside people in times of grief, in times of sickness, visiting hospitals, and all of those kinds of things. But here's the problem. If I, as the lead pastor of Beech Grove, take that on, and if I am the primary person doing that, what happens? There's a neglecting of the word prayer. And my default mode, the problem is my default mode is a lot of times I'm really comfortable coming alongside people in times of grief, in times of suffering, in times of struggle. That's my default mode, but sometimes your strength becomes a weakness, right? And that happens to all of us. And so that very same struggle, I think, is a part of who we are right here, and a part of every church, in fact, of every era and every age, who is going to primarily be responsible for caring for the flock, or the body, as we would say, using all those illustrations that the New Testament uses, and who's going to preach the Word, and who's going to make sure that there is prayer and preaching at the center of who the church is. Now, the thing that we see in our day, and the struggle we see in our day, is so many churches have given up the preaching of the Word. So many churches have set that on the back burner. For one thing, they'll say, you know what? Doctrine and theology and preaching is just divisive. You know, people divide over doctrine and theology and all. We should set that aside, and we should all just love one another. The problem is, apart from the Word of God, we don't have any basis for loving one another. We don't even know how to love one another. We are not empowered to love one another. We're going to neglect that. No matter if we go that route of saying, okay, let's just set doctrine and preaching, set that on the back burner, then we're going to, by just our very human nature, set on the back burner the ability that we have, and the instructions that we have, and the teaching that we have that shows us how we care for each other and how we carry out the work of the church together. So this is what was happening in the early church, and it's what very easily can happen to us today. And so the 12 summoned the full number of the disciples and said, it is not right that we should give up preaching the Word of God to serve tables. Therefore, brothers, pick out from among you 7 men of good repute, full of the Spirit and of wisdom. Notice there, it gives characteristics, full of the Spirit and wisdom, whom we will appoint to this duty. But we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the Word. And so they made a simple organizational move here. They said, we're going to broaden the organization. We're going to call some people alongside so that we can not neglect this to accomplish this, and not neglect this to accomplish this. And in verse 5, we read, and what they said pleased the whole gathering. And they chose, and they give these men's names. They are all Greek names, or Hellenist names. Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Holy Spirit, and Philip, and Prochorus, and Nicanor, and Timon, and Parmenas, and Nicholas, a proselyte of Antioch. So they set these men aside, and everybody said, this is a good solution. This is a good way to go about this. And these they set before the apostles, and they prayed, and they laid their hands on them. It doesn't say who laid their hands on them. All the people come together, and they laid hands on them. And now listen to what happened from there. Verse 7, and the Word of God continued to increase, and the number of the disciples multiplied greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests, these are the Jewish priests, became obedient to the faith. So what happened? As they broadened the organization, as they made a way to not neglect this for this, or neglect this for this, they said, okay, the preaching of the Word and prayer are vital. The caring for the body is also vital. And in that process, there was a renewal, a new power, and a new effectiveness among the people. And God's Word continued to go out, and they continued to increase. And many of the priests, these were the hard to reach. Okay? These were the, if you want to say, unreached people group. The priests were an unreached people group. These were difficult people to reach. And in fact, they had stood against the gospel. And now they are seeing that the Word is going out, and the body is caring for one another. And the witness of the body of Christ is strengthened among the people. And even some of the most difficult to reach people, their hearts were melted by the work of the Holy Spirit, and they came into the body. Isn't that amazing? Now, as we do this today, we're not saying that these 2 men alongside these other men who are our deacons, that all of our problems are going to be solved. That's not what we're saying at all. We are just simply broadening our organization. We're broadening our ability. These guys are coming alongside Tim Zappa and Dave Ratliff and John Benditz and Terry Reed, Royce Gately and Justin Lane, Mike Wood and Jeremy Hammer. These men are coming alongside them. There are other men, we believe, who also, in the not too distant future, be called alongside into this process as well. And we want to strengthen our ability to care for the body and not sacrifice the preaching of the Word and prayer in the process, but instead keep that central to who we are and what we do. So, every time our deacons get together, they ask 4 questions. How can we help care for the body? How can we assist with the preaching of the Word? How can we help build unity in the body? And then, sort of outside Acts 6, but along with what we traditionally see as a deacon responsibility, when do we serve the next Lord's Supper? And so those 4 questions, this is what our deacons do. Our deacons are not a governing body. In fact, if you try to lay something on them that is a governing a governing role, they'll say, no, that's not our role. This is our role. And we ask those 4 questions every time our deacons come together. How can we help care for the body? How can we assist with the preaching of the Word? How can we help build unity in the body? And when do we serve the next Lord's Supper? And these men will come alongside and assist with this. Now, I'm going to have some of our deacons come, and we are going to both introduce these individuals and hear testimony from them, and then we'll have a charge to them, we'll pray over them, and then we'll share in the Lord's Supper. And right now, Royce Gately is going to come and introduce Larry McPherson. Guys, if you're on the program here, if you'll come up right now and be right here close so we don't have to wait for you to come up. And Royce is going to introduce Larry, and then Larry's going to come and share a testimony. And then Jeremy's going to introduce Justin, and Justin will share a testimony. And then we will pray over these men and share in the Lord's Supper.
Okay, y'all know Larry, or he's sitting here. And I will tell you that Larry and Linda came down from Upper Illinois 16 years ago to visit their son John, who lived in the area at that time. They didn't go back. Well, Larry did, because he had to sell the house, but Linda got a job the week between Christmas and New Year's, which is unheard of. But they stayed. And Linda and Larry have been married 47 years, almost 48. And Larry retired from Clayton 2 years ago, and he became a valuable member of the Builders on Mission at that time. And Linda then just retired a year ago, and she's been a valuable asset. The daughter Andrea is here visiting today. We're glad to have you. And just to give you a little background, because if you ever talk to Larry, you'll know that he was raised in Yankee land, okay? But his parents, as well as his grandparents, are from Somerset, Kentucky. And that's the reason he went there, because his father went up to work for Ford Motor Company. Larry.
Thank you, Royce. It is just an honor and privilege to be nominated to be a deacon. I've been raised in the Baptist church my whole life. My parents were Christians. And it's just a very humbling experience to be among the other deacons. And God has just been so gracious to Linda and myself. Everywhere we have lived, we haven't really moved that much. The big move, like Roy said, was 16 years ago when we moved down here. But we've always been a member of a church. We've always served in a church. I've been a deacon before at another church up north. It's been a lot of years I haven't, but I was raised in it was the first regular Baptist church of Hammond, Indiana, and we lived in a little suburb called Hessville, Indiana. And my first minister was a Reverend James Frank, and that's the only church I knew growing up. It's the only church I ever attended growing up. He was a wonderful man of Christ, and through that experience of being a member, becoming a member of that church, I was led to the Lord when I was 13 years old by my Sunday school teacher, and his name was Cleo Pearson. And it's funny because after he led me to Christ when I was 13 years ago, we actually met up again years later at Suburban Bible Church in Highland, Indiana, where we were going to church at that time. So to get to see him again after all those years, it was amazing to know that he was still in the church, and I was too, along with Linda and our kids. I was at First Regular Baptist Church in Hessville. Back then I was a member of what was called Pioneer Boys. And that's what helped lead me to the Lord. Like I said, through all those moves, our last move from up north, we lived in Lombard, Illinois, and we were members and attended Village Green Baptist Church, which one of those funny stories, when we met Larry and Emma Jeffers, they used to go up there. So it's just amazing how you can just run into so many different people. But anyway, my favorite book of the Bible is Hebrews. And the verses that I love to read when I need a little more assurance of faith is, of course, Hebrews is known as the book of faith. And if you read chapter 11, it's just faith, faith, faith. All the other fellow saints before us were faithful to God. And 11:1 is my favorite verse. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. And that answers everything to me. Because I know He's there whether I see Him or not. And I know if I ask forgiveness, that He'll forgive me. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm here to introduce Justin Knitsch, and Justin and his wife Nicole, and I think Mr. Keegan has gone on down. But I got to know Justin and Nicole here through church around 5 years ago, where I first met them at, and then I really got to know Justin and Nicole through our small group Bible study. And because of that, we spent a lot of time together throughout the years. Our families have spent time hiking and camping and swimming and just playing basketball. Spent a lot of time together over the years. And as Kenny said in Acts 6, deacons are servants. Okay, and I just want to show you Justin's heart in serving his church. He and Nicole run our Family Promise Ministry. He is one of our youth leaders for our Wednesday night Connect groups. He is on rotation as a Sunday school teacher for our youth on Sunday mornings. He recently volunteered another one of his Sunday mornings to work in our preschool area with the children. He participates in the Men's Armor Ministries. And during our Beech Grove sports season, he volunteers his time as a coach and a referee. He did a day of devotions for the crowds that show up this year, as well as he and Kenny and I put this stage up every Saturday after the games. Now, I say all this not to puff Justin up, but because I read this quote. Charles Spurgeon had this to say about deacons. It said, "The church owes an immeasurable debt of gratitude to those godly men who study her interests day and night. They contribute largely to their substance, care for her poor, cheer her ministers, and in times of trouble and prosperity, they remain faithful at their post." Guys, all you have to do is look at that list that I just named off of Justin to see his service here at Beech Grove, and I believe he's already proved the point that he is faithful at his post. And I just really look forward to working with him in this ministry. Justin Knish.
Good morning, everyone. Again, I just want to, like Larry elaborated on, I just want to thank you guys for this opportunity and to serve you guys as a deacon of Beech Grove Baptist Church. And that's the beauty of testimonies, is that my testimony is so much different than Larry's. I came from a family of 5, 2 siblings, and my parents were loving parents, amazing parents. Took us to church just because they felt like that was a good thing to do, that was the right thing to do, but they took us some Sundays and occasionally, and never were really a part of the church, and slowly that kind of faded away. I think some of the reasons were, obviously we were just not serving, we weren't really part of the body, and they were sending us there just to help us be good people, is how they felt. And so we slowly started to kind of put separate paths away from the church. I was big into travel baseball. We played on Sundays. We were always going out of town. Had 2 siblings that were doing other sports on Saturdays, and they finally, when we got to about 11, 12 years old, they just said, we're not going to go to church anymore. And for whatever reason, we just stopped. And we were kind of far away from the church we were going to, and they just never seeked out another church. But the reason I'm saying this is because so many years through my life, I just fell away from God. Got very distant from Him, got very, hated Him sometimes, to be honest with you. Just got to a point where I just felt like I knew there was God, but God wasn't doing what I wanted Him to do for my life. And kind of resented Him for that. But Heather invited us. We moved here to Knoxville for our lovely niece and nephew, because we were so far away from them and wanted to be able to spend more time with them. And so we moved here, never once really thinking that we were just going to be a part of a church, but that we were going to be moving here just to be closer to family. Heather wanted us to come to Beech Grove. We actually have come here a couple times as just visitors, and we were visiting on the weekend and stuff. We may have come by a few times, right? But when we first started coming to Beech Grove, when we moved here, it was it's an interesting experience. We had a lot of people here that really showed us the love and the grace that they had for us. But even after coming here for a few months, I still just, for whatever reason it was, I just could not fathom the fact of having a relationship with God. Just didn't want to be honest with you. But then it got to the point that Heather actually asked us to come here. My wife was coming here regularly, and I was kind of not. I was trying to find whatever excuse I could not to come here on Sunday and just to sleep in. I'd much rather have my bed, and that's about it. But the big reason I say this is because God can show you how amazing it is just to be able, that He doesn't give up on you. He doesn't stop. And it's amazing that He didn't stop for me. At 26, I gave my life over to Him. 26 years were tough. But He's seeking me. And I remember Kenny had a message, just a simple message about salvation and what it meant to give your life over to Christ. And that it wasn't easy. When I became a Christian, it wasn't easy. It's still a struggle, it's still tough. But I remember reading in Romans 3, 24 through, or 23, excuse me, through 24. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That was me, right? Multiple times. But and are justified by His grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Jesus Christ. He gave me a gift. He gave me love. He gave me mercy. He gave me grace. He gave me stuff that I could not have done on my own. Stuff that a faith that I couldn't have in myself. A faith that I couldn't have in my wife. A faith that I couldn't have in my sister-in-law. A faith that I couldn't have necessarily in you guys. But a faith I can only have in Jesus Christ. But because of who Jesus Christ is, He gave me you guys. He gave me Beech Grove. He gave me brothers and sisters in Christ to encourage me, to lift me up. When struggles were tough, He helped me through you. In John 3:16, what does He say? Everybody will say with me. For God so loved the world, He gave His only Son. Shall not perish, but have everlasting life. When I talked to the kids on this morning, when I was when I was leading Sunday school, we talked about faith. Larry mentioned it. My faith was non-existent in God, but He pulled me through it. He gave me a gift who is Jesus Christ. A gift that I can never repay Him. But through the brokenness that I was, through the sinful person that I was, through the wretch that I am, He forgave me. He gave me love instead of hate. He gave me forgiveness instead of saying, you don't deserve this. I love Beech Grove Baptist Church. I look at a lot of people in here and I see so many men in here, like Kenny mentioned. There's so many men in here that serve our church. And sometimes I ask myself, how did I get to this point? God, how did you bring me here? But I thank Him so much for allowing me this opportunity. I thank Him so much for allowing me to serve with great men in this church, not just deacons, but every man in this church, every woman in this church that serve for our kids. I remember listening to a sermon one day and I broke down. Jimmy was my wife and I, we struggled, just because we weren't having kids. We prayed a lot about it, sometimes just individually, sometimes together, but I remember Jimmy, the reason why I'm serving where I am now, there's so many kids that are broken. There's so many young people that are broken. There's so many adults that are broken. I could serve my time better than where I do sometimes. I could serve the Lord instead of serving myself. And I'm just so grateful that He put me in a leadership role to be able to share my testimony on a daily basis with these kids. But it's amazing to see how God can work in your life. I encourage you, if you're in this room today, if you have not given your life to Jesus Christ, I pray that you'll seek Him. I pray that you'll ask Him for forgiveness. I pray that you'll ask Him for help. Christ will hear you. God hears you every single day. God knows where your heart is. God knows where your mind is. I pray that you'll seek Him, that you'll surrender your life to Him. 26 years of my life were what I would consider what I wanted to do and fun. The last 5 years of my life have been great. They've been a moment where when I struggle, I know there's God to pull me through it instead of myself. I love you guys, each and every one of you. Thank you for this time, and again, I thank you for the opportunity to serve you.
I think you can see that both of these guys have been prepared by the Lord for this purpose and are rising to the occasion. And in just a moment, we're going to pray over them. And this is going to be a little chaotic, but that's okay. We're just going to live with the chaos, all right? And Larry, I'm going to ask that you go to this side, not right this second, but in just a moment. And Linda, if you will join him, please. And Justin and Nicole, if you'll go to this side. And I think Tim Zappa is going to lead in prayer. Justin, John Menditz over Larry. What I'm going to ask you to do is to just go and lay hands on them. And if you can't reach them, lay hands on the person in front of you. And let's just pray over these men. And I've given it a privilege to be able to do that today. But before we go and do this, let me just say to you, Beech Grove, leaders are held to higher standards. They deserve our respect. Leaders face greater temptations. They need our prayers. Leaders bear heavier burdens, and these guys assist me in bearing the burdens of this church. And they depend, we together depend upon your support. And we express that now as we pray over them. If you men will go, as I said, and then others will. And Patrick, I failed to do one thing. I'm going to get a couple microphones here and let Tim and John have them. The rest of you will come now and join behind these men who are leading in prayer. I have number 1, number 4.
Ask that you continue to strengthen him, Lord, and ask that you fill him with the Holy Spirit.
Father God, I pray your hedge of protection
To bring unity to this church, Lord,
sanctified.
unleash the ministers of this church, Lord.
Personally, Father God, I
ask that
pray
you place a hedge of protection around him, Lord. Lift him up out of
learns how to love
He feels like
his family.
the burdens are oppressing him, Lord. We ask that
I
you
ask that you continue to
allow him to
him
be
gentleness,
moving of the Holy Spirit, Lord.
gentleness as he serves his
Help us to
family in
reach
this
that
church.
spirit of unity in this church, not just
Pray, Father,
crap
always
direction,
build that.
would be
God,
correct
help
in our
him
minds,
to
that
continue learning to
all
be generous
that
in every
this
kind of
whole
way, protect him from any type
fellowship
of
together.
Father, I just pray
you direction.
always stay in front of him.
Ask for all these things because it's done.
Father, just ask
not
Father
done.
that you
Holy Spirit
continue to guide him into his service, God, ministries that he supports,
not
people that he cares for. Father, that he will just have an innate desire always to serve you and serve others.
Your Heavenly Father.
Continue to develop self-control,
Ask that
God, as he
you
continues in his service here in the body. He would know what that is like. He would continue to sanctify and be more like you in self-control every day. Father, develop the word of truth in him always. Pray that you will always open your eyes to him as to who you are and what your truth is. And always, Father, develop wisdom in him. Wisdom in his own life, his family life. Wisdom as he serves the body here. Wisdom as he serves you in the community. God, I just pray all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
All God's people say it.
Amen.
You will make your way back to your seat, please. We will, in just a moment, share the Lord's Supper. And let me just say how much I Dustin and for Larry, for their wives, for Linda, for Nicole, and what a blessing we have. It has been to hear from these men today, hasn't it? Wonderful blessing. And as a church family, we come together now around the table. Not a table where we are sitting down and, like our, as we call them, potluck, multiple choice meals. It is a simple table, a table where we center our minds on the fact that God the Son came bodily and was sacrificed for our sins, as a perfect sacrifice for our sins. He gave his body up on the cross. He said, I did not take my life from me, but I lay it down. He laid his life down willingly for you and for me. And when we celebrate the blood that was shed for you and for me, because the Scripture tells us that without the shedding of blood, God's plan, God's economy, without the shedding of blood, there can be no forgiveness of sin. But there was the blood of animals, no other blood would suffice except for the blood of the perfect, spotless Lamb of God. Jesus Christ shed blood for us, that all who come, whosoever will, may come. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And we share in that today. As Justin shared so well, if you have never made that commitment of your life to Christ, we hope today you will say, Christ died for me. He died for me. It's through him that forgiveness of sin is offered. And that you will repent of your sin and turn to Jesus Christ today, even in this time when we share in the Lord's Supper. We do encourage that those who receive the supper today be those who committed their lives to Jesus Christ and followed him in baptism, and that this be a time of reflection and just a reminder that it is through Christ that our sins are forgiven, that we have eternal life, and that we look up every day because he's coming. He's coming. Let's pray with you. Lord, as we receive the supper, we ask you that this would be a sacred time in our lives, that this would be a time of reflection, being reminded that through Christ, through you, our sins have been forgiven, that we have this promise of eternal life, that just as you rose again from the grave, we also will live along with you. And that one day you're going to come and receive your church, your bride, unto yourself. And we will all together with the saints of all the ages share in your glory and eternity for all of eternity. We will share in this wonderful, glorious privilege. And we pray in Jesus' name. And again, all God's people say, amen. All right, our deacons will now come and share. I should remind you also that there are gluten-free crackers in here. If you need this, and everyone wait until everyone is served before you receive it. Jesus gathered in the upper room with his disciples, he took the bread and he broke it and he passed it among them and said to them, "This is my body which is for you. As often as you eat of it, do it in remembrance of me." Also, Jesus took the cup and he passed it among his followers, and he said to them, "This is the blood of the new covenant, New Testament, which is shed for you. As often as you drink it, do it in remembrance of me." As we close this morning, I want to ask all of our deacons, if you guys would just come, some of you to this side, some of you to this side. I know some of you will want to come and greet, especially Larry and Justin. But these men will pray with you. If you would like to pray with them, or maybe you would like to pray for them as leaders of our church, we would love for you to do that. And guys, if you will just, some of you on this side, some of you on this side, if you would need to pray with someone this morning, they will pray with you. If you would like to pray for them, you can also come and do that as well. Scripture tells us that when Jesus shared that first Lord's Supper, as we call it, with his disciples, that as they went out of the room, they stood and they sang a hymn together, and then they went out. So I'm going to ask you to stand, and a song that we all know and can